I invested in Noah, and they were very, very good about being specific about what you really needed to do, what you needed to be careful about. They inspected every step of the process.
Welcome to the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast, the show where you learn how to plan, build, and live the tiny lifestyle. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, and today my guest is Kate Bohn. I've been wanting to feature more voices from my community, Tiny House Engage, and Kate is a longtime member who came to the community dreaming of a tiny house, and over the course of the last 2 years has purchased a tiny house shell, completed it with her husband, and moved to Arizona. Kate actually wasn't planning to build a shell. Her builder was supposed to deliver a completed tiny house, but kind of bailed on her, those are her words, not mine, and left her with a tiny house shell. Still though, Kate was really systematic and really planful about her tiny house build, and it shows in the end product. So in this conversation, we'll talk through the decision-making process, how she approached building out the shell, how she saved money by finding used items on Facebook and in other places, and whether the reality of living tiny has met her expectations. I hope you stick around. But before we get started, did you know that I personally send Tiny House newsletter every week on Tuesdays? It's called Tiny Tuesdays, and it's a weekly email with tiny house news, interviews, photos, and resources. It's free to subscribe, and I even share sneak peeks of things that are coming up, ask for feedback about upcoming podcast guests, and more. It's really the best place to keep a pulse on what I'm doing in the tiny house space and also stay informed of what's going on in the tiny house movement. To sign up, go to thetinyhouse.net/newsletter, where you can sign up for the Tiny Tuesdays newsletter. And of course, you can unsubscribe at any time. I will never send you spam. And if you ever don't want to receive emails, it's easy to unsubscribe. So again, that's thetinyhouse.net/newsletter. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's Tiny Tuesdays newsletter. All right, I am here with Kate Bohn. Kate and her husband got a shell from a builder, and with the help of a plumber, always a good friend to have, and friends, completed like Canada in 10 months. She's now living in Arizona. There were a few bumps along the way, and she's still working towards being more off-grid. Kate Bohn, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's great to have you here because I feel like I've been following your tiny house journey since before a house existed at all. And you decided to go with a pre-built shell and then finish it out yourself. Can you just start by telling us about why you wanted to go tiny in the first place?
I was kind of inspired by a friend. She started talking about, minimal living and things like that. And I kind of poked into it. And I've been downsizing since before I'd even considered going tiny. So it really appealed to me, like the less cleaning was a big one. And also like energy conservation, water conservation. I'm pretty big on those things. So it was it was pretty inspiring. And then, I saw all the builders that had gone before and all their stories, and it was just very it was very cool to watch and see.
Nice. So did you own like a traditional home before the tiny home?
Yeah, we lived in about 1,800 square feet,
Okay.
and but it was a 6-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms. So
Wow.
it was a lot of house, even though it was, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
2,000 square feet like a lot of them are. But, just the maintenance for, I want to say, we had it just over 20 years. And I'd
Mm-hmm.
done everything, some things twice, as far as like the roof, and we had like a septic system we had to change out and things like that. So it was just a lot of constant labor with something that big.
Yeah.
We also had renters at one point just because we didn't need the space, and
Uh-huh.
and it was just a stepping stone.
Got it. So can you talk about your decision making process around, why you decided to go with a pre-built shell, and how you went about finding that shell?
Well, initially I was trying to find a builder that would actually do all of the work because I had done all that work in my previous house for 20 years, and it didn't really interest me to actually do more building. But yeah, but I started in probably about 2010 trying to discover everything that would make a tiny house like healthy, everything I would need. And a lot of your podcasts help me figure that out. Like I've got a air system
Mm-hmm.
that's constantly going to filter air. I put very, very thick insulation in because that's important no matter where you go, to keep you cool or to keep you warm. And it's been really nice this winter.
Mm-hmm.
I, but the thing is that we ended up with a shell with the builder that we went with because he kind of flaked out on us. And so I
Ah,
was just glad that I got anything out of it because he
yeah.
kind of he wasn't he wasn't specific enough. If I had to do it all again, I would definitely go with an even more reputable builder and do more research for that before I got started.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I wanted very specific things for my house, and that's kind of why we ended up with the person that we did, because he actually worked directly with
Yeah.
the company that does the steel framing. And that was very important to me because steel framing is lighter and it's designed in such a way it's very, very sturdy, and that very much appealed to me. It was a little difficult to build out, however, everything that we did pretty much involved a drill and very long screws. So that
Yeah.
kind of took a little bit of time, and that was probably part of the reason we got flaked on.
Yep.
Um, but I ultimately, even just getting the shell, and because he didn't have like all the things that he had, that I had asked for, none of that stuff got done. I was able to outfit it exactly the way I wanted to. I've got water tanks on either
Mm-hmm.
side of my house. I've got an electrical system that's pretty heavy duty. I'm getting solar put in the next few weeks, and that is going to tie in nicely
Nice.
based on the way that we did things. And that was all done in part because I invested in NOAA, which is that certification, or one of the certifications you get for tiny houses. And they were very, very good
Okay.
about being specific about what you really needed to do, what you needed to be careful about. They inspected every
Mm-hmm.
step of the process. And so I've got a seal on my house that if I wanted to sell my house, which I don't, I love my house, it would be easier to do that process because they can literally go on the site, they can look at everything that is photographs, all the documents that I've uploaded, all of those things. And it just makes it a
Mm-hmm.
better process, I think, for both buyer and seller.
Yeah, absolutely. Having some kind of certification, some kind of vetting process is very helpful, you know, for a used tiny house, and then also frankly for buying a tiny house from someone. Was the builder that you initially worked with also working through Noah or working
Yeah.
through your Noah? Okay.
Yeah, he had gotten NOAA certified, but they had changed how they were doing the certifications. So unless he had done the full
Mm-hmm.
build, I couldn't get the seal from him. So I paid
Ah.
him for what should have been the whole part of it, and I only got like the first 2.5 stages done, which I mean
Mm,
it was a little annoying, but I I would still
yeah.
pay the extra money to do the notice certification. They are very, very, very
Certification.
knowledgeable and very, very good at answering so many of the questions that, come up as you're building a house that it's hard to know everything.
Yeah, it is definitely hard to know everything. So when your builder kind of flaked out, can you say more? Like what do you mean by flaked out? He just like stopped responding, just dropped the tiny house off and was like, I'm done with this? Like what happened?
So COVID happened.
Okay.
On the builder's website, he said that he taught people how to build and do those kind of things. So I was like, "Oh, that's great. I'd love to learn do this hands-on thing."
Mm-hmm.
And when we negotiated our price,
Mm-hmm.
we negotiated it so that I would go to Oregon and I would work on my house while he was working on my house, and so we would work together. But COVID happened, but also his insurance happened, and they said, "You can't have her there. That's a liability. We won't allow
Mm,
it." And I'm like, I think you didn't really think your business plan through, but because I couldn't do that and he couldn't finish it for the costs that we had negotiated, we settled on, well, he'll just build a shell, basically.
okay.
With a
Okay.
couple of things added in. But yeah.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Well, that I've heard horror stories about builders and these kind of situations, and that like sounds really frustrating, but it also doesn't sound like as bad as it could have been or as bad as I've heard.
No, it definitely, I mean, like, I got a house out of it. It could have been a lot
Yeah.
worse. But
Yeah.
but yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to follow up, what kinds of things would you look for in a builder if you had to do it again? Because you mentioned like wanting to do more research and do more, educate yourself better. But, you struck me as somebody who was doing a lot of research and was educating themselves before finding the builder. So, for our listeners who are, in the before part of this journey, what can you tell them of what to look for in a builder?
The biggest thing is, what are their finished products?
Mm-hmm.
Ask them for their references. Talk to the people that they've already dealt with. I checked into Better Business Bureau with this guy. I checked into other things, and he went bankrupt last year too. So it was like,
Mm.
so I mean, like, ultimately he
Business
failed.
model was not working out.
His business model didn't work out, and I think, and I know that COVID had a lot to do with it. Rising costs and inflation had a lot to do with it, because he couldn't give people what he had promised, because it
Mm-hmm.
just was simply too expensive. Like, even, okay,
Mm-hmm.
he had some plumbing work done in my house, and his plumber ended up like really way overcharging him for what they gave, and they installed the gas line wrong. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I, again, having a good plumber, who checked out all of that systems before we closed everything up, like two,
Yeah.
three, four, five, six times, because he was very much a stickler for that you need to have safety.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I appreciate that. So, like, the builder had bad problems too on his side, just with the people he outsourced with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would definitely ask who he's working with. Ask him for his full plan from beginning to end, like what he's going to do each week. Make sure he sends you pictures if you're not on site, because I was in Minnesota, he was in Oregon, and I couldn't check, at all really what kind of progress he was making.
Yeah.
And part of the problem was he was supposed to start my build in May. He didn't start until July, and we didn't get it until Labor Day. So, I mean, that was clearly some breakdown. And part of that, again, COVID, because he couldn't find people to work. The construction community is still quite busy right now. And so what he had relied on in his business plan was pretty loosey-goosey for finding contractors, and it just didn't work out for him. I could have told him that, because I started buying, seeing the inflation was happening for all of the stuff that went inside of the house when I discovered I was going to have to do it. I started buying in July. And so I bought everything in July and made sure, like, I had a garage that was, came with the apartment that we had. So I had storage that I wasn't paying extra for. And it ended up working out very much in our favor, because we probably saved thousands of dollars doing it that way. And I bought things, a lot of used stuff off of Facebook. I shopped deals. I got an Amazon card so I could get extra points and things. So if I bought big things, then I could buy a bunch of little things later, because I had all this cash back that I got that I could apply to that situation. So I saved a lot of money seeing things coming and making sure that I had everything done. And then I didn't really stress, because I didn't have to buy a lot of, extras. The electrical was something that I had to do as I was doing it, because we weren't really sure what we were doing. I had a friend that helped me.
Yeah.
The plumber, I bought stuff when he was in the process of doing plumbing. Mm-hmm. But again, it was just odds and ends. It wasn't anything that added up to a real expense. Like, I think I spent maybe $1,500 on the whole electrical system, just between wires, and I put in a huge amount of outlets and like the lighting and everything else. So it was actually inexpensive compared to like trying to hire out an electrician for that. But again, costs were going up, and so we spent more on that, like probably 10 to 20% more, because I didn't buy it until like November.
And did you bring the shell from Oregon back home to finish out, or did you go to Oregon to finish it? Okay,
no,
you brought it home.
We brought it home. I didn't have a license for it because I didn't have the title to it, or any paperwork at all. I actually didn't get my, I've sold you your house papers until we got to Oregon. So I had to call each individual state and ask them what I needed to do to get permission to drive this trailer through their area.
Wow.
I think there was only 2 that we had to get permits for. I think it was Oregon we had to get a permit for, and Idaho, maybe Montana. But everybody else was like, yeah, zoom on through. It's fine. It's, not a big deal. You're going to get it titled when you get back. But it was really nice, because there are companies that do the title or do the permitting for semis. And if you call them up, they'll actually tell you who you need to contact and what you need to do in order to get your stuff, even though they can't do it for you directly. So it's always a good resource to have if you don't have the papers and you have to drive across many states to get it home, or you don't want to pay to have somebody ship it to you, because the cost of driving it home versus shipping it was probably about $2,500 cheaper, because I think at the time it was like $3,000 to bring something across states or whatever it is. Yeah. And I know you can't do that in every state. I think there's special laws for New England area because of the way the roads are there. But going from Minnesota out west, you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
If you plan before you do that. because I had everything in hand before we even left state.
What did you use for a tow vehicle?
I have a Ford F-350 dually.
Okay. And did you buy that truck in anticipation of tiny living, or is that the truck that you already drove?
I didn't buy it in anticipation, but I knew we needed one. My mom had one, and she had been using it for her fifth wheel. And so she didn't need it anymore. So I got it from my mom. It's a 2004, so it's
nice,
pretty old and used, but yeah, I got lucky because family had something that I could use and have. It was it was easier towing it from Oregon to Minnesota when it was completely empty versus like when we brought it back. It was probably like 6,000 pounds when we brought it back from Oregon. Driving it from Minnesota to Arizona, it was like 11,582 or something like that. And I was like, oh no, I got it up to like almost the full towing capacity. Oops. But still, it towed just fine. We were going like maybe top speed of 60, which, I mean, you wouldn't go very fast with a tiny house anyway.
Right. Yeah, you kind of wouldn't want to go much faster than that.
No.
So there's actually a question from a fellow Tiny House Engage member, Lynn, who says, I have a shell, wondering what comes next, electric? And so I guess, my question is like, first of all, a preface that not all shells are created equal, and like what one shell might have in it is going to be different than others. But maybe you can talk a little bit about like what your shell had when you got it, and then like what was your order of operations for how you built it out from there.
My shell had the waste pipe because I have elevated flooring, so I could have more insulation. And so they ran a waste pipe for me, and they ran water lines for me from front to back, because my kitchen is on one end, my bathroom's on the other, which I know most people don't have. Everybody usually has everything kind of together.
Yeah.
But I was able to do that just because everything's up in the floors. So there's nothing, and everything's like out of the walls. So it makes a difference having that done first, because anything that you need to do with floors, especially like mine, where it was very much of a pain to like pull up that big, thick 3/4 inch floorboard to try and get underneath and do things for that. So that was, and then we had like the gas line that we had to get replaced. So that those were the two things that were in my house when I brought it home. We didn't have anything else. It was just bare studs everywhere. And
no insulation.
No insulation. And in fact, if you're going to do anything at all, you probably want to put in your wires and any plumbing if you're going to put it in the walls before you do insulation. We had, and again, this was something that my builder did wrong. You're supposed to have waste pipes that go up and out. Like it's just a thing. It's common on normal houses. Something you should have in your tiny house. And he was trying to get away with like these vents that just kind of popped on, and Noah was like, you really need the waste pipe. So that's something that I had put in first by my plumber that I engaged, and then I put in the electrical myself before we did anything else. And so I also found somebody off of Facebook who did spray foam insulation. So we drove our tiny house to his house, had him spray foam it, and then drove it home and put it back where we had it. So that was kind of the order of what we did. But we had like all of the electrical in place, which means if you're going to have, I can't think of the name of them now, but but like the airflow and things that we have, sorry, brain lost it. Anything having to do with electrical that you know that's going to have to hook up, like you should have the stuff for your smoke detectors, because smoke detectors are supposed to be wired in. They're not supposed to be battery operated only. If you're going to have a fan, you know, make sure that you have like the vent for where you're going to put it. You know, you should really be venting outside if you can help it, just because it helps your air be cleaner. Any of those like low system things, I would say are pretty important to do before you move on to like insulation. Having said that, we were doing our insulation at like end of December, and so our house kind of sat for a little bit waiting, because it was like -12, -15 for like a month, and we were just like, we're not going to work on that.
Wow.
That's kind of why it took so long. Is we had like 2 months where we really couldn't do anything.
But even still, it seems like you got it done pretty quickly.
I was very motivated to get it done.
I'm sure. Tell me about your kitchen and your kitchen cabinets. They have a very unique, almost, I'm going to say industrial, but I don't mean that as a like insult. I really like how they look, but what are they, or where are they from?
Well, I can kind of show you, because I'm not actually in my kitchen. I'm in my my bedroom living area. So my kitchen is right here. And they are kind of industrial. They've got, with the exception of like the little box that's under my stove, they're by design for mobility. I found a company that does aluminum cabinets called Moduline. And it was a little more expensive. Like the things I spent money on were systems, my cabinets, you know, insulation. But because they lock, you know, they pop open and they lock. So they don't come open when you're driving down the road.
Nice.
And because they're lighter than wood cabinets, that was like pretty much my infatuation with them. But yeah, they're all metal. I've got them in my kitchen, I've got them in my living area, and I've got like one in my bathroom. So
nice.
Yeah,
they're really cool. I love how in a tiny house you can find these kind of products that you wouldn't necessarily think to put in a single family home, but you end up, you know, it looks like, you know, I Googled Moduline, and it looks like primarily their use case is building cabinets for like shops and other industrial spaces, but they look really nice in your tiny house. And I can imagine that the aluminum cabinets are a fraction of the weight of a, you know, equivalent plywood box.
Yeah. When I got them, I could just like pick them up myself and just kind of like fling them around. They moved around that garage like
nice.
four or five times, but yeah.
Nice. Can you speak to the importance of just kind of paying attention to how you live when you design your house?
I think that a lot of people, when they live in their spaces, we don't have a lot of time. We're always pretty busy, and there's not really much focus on how we're using the things around us to make our lives more effective, even because when you can plan for oh, okay, this is what my routine is like in the morning, so I can set up my kitchen like a very specific way, and I, you know, shave off 5-10 minutes of our day, but also realizing that like I put in really tall cabinets. I'm a very short person, and I had lived in a studio apartment prior to, you know, getting into the tiny house, and their cabinets were also high, and I thought, "Oh, this is going to be terrible, because what, you know, what about the things I need?" Well, I realized that I only need a step stool, and it doesn't take very long. Like I can reach everything on the bottom shelves pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the things that I use the most. So I almost never go up in those top shelves. So it's, it's like, if you plan your spaces for kind of the things that you use, the things that you need, a lot of times you can find out that there are just simply things that you don't need in your life. And so it's really easy to kind of reduce like the clutter and the busyness of what's going on, and it makes
Yeah.
it much easier to live tiny. But also, like, I hate cleaning. I really hate cleaning. And it was really important to me to design a space that was very easy to wipe up if I needed to. Like,
Yeah.
having the two cats, like just bringing them in that I have, like I can sweep. It takes like 5-10 minutes tops, and that's it. Like I can do that every day,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't really add, it doesn't take away from my ability to live in the space that I have. But when you sit down and you plan for those things before before you design, you can really make your space work much better for you. And like I know a lot of people go and they'll like buy houses that somebody else built, and they're like, oh, but I wish the kitchen was more like this. It's
Yeah.
that's because that person looked at that space and they were like, oh, this is how everyone is doing it. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way of doing it. It just means they didn't really put enough thought into, oh, this is how I'm going to live in the space.
Yeah.
So like in my house, I have like a huge open area. And I thought about like doing a Murphy bed, and I looked into lofts, and I thought, no, that's a terrible idea. I'm clumsy and I'd fall down. So we didn't put any lofts in our house. And it was like by design, gonna retire here. And when you retire and as you get older, climbing is very, very difficult. And so that
Mm-hmm.
was like one of the thoughtful things that I did, like, oh, before you design something that, oh, just because everyone has lofts. No. What are you going to do with your space? And so that's why it's just super important to think about, okay, what is the end result of the house that I'm going to be in? Like I know some people like live outdoors, and so it's like it doesn't matter really what their space is like as long as they got a place to like crash. I don't have a couch, but I do have like a fold away memory foam thing that I pop down every once in a while. I didn't pull it down today because I didn't feel like it. I sit on my floor a lot. It's just fine for me. But we do have that we can put on the floor, and it's basically a couch, but we can also put it away and it's not, then we still have that free walking space.
Mm-hmm.
Like if somebody needs to wear crutches, and I've had to do that before and I'm going to have to do it again. So I just thinking about what's the most likely scenarios for you living in a space? What's the thing that might happen that you just don't expect?
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of thinking, well, again, for me, it was crutches. So I tried to make this space a little more handicapped accessible, just knowing that we're going to, age out in this house.
Yeah. So you made the move from Minnesota to Arizona. That's quite the move. Are you renting land? Did you buy land? What's your parking situation?
My parking situation it was the one thing that I didn't think about, or that I couldn't think about because I was kind of too enmeshed in building.
Sure. Sure.
And my mom and her boyfriend, they live on a fairly significant plot of land here in Arizona, and
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of said, hey, would you be okay with us moving the house there and us living there, and and we can kind of like work out an arrangement. Well, and I was thinking when I moved here, yeah, I'd probably be paying some kind of rent on the land, but I ended up doing
Yeah.
more of a bartering situation where I do a lot of the grocery
Uh-huh.
shopping. I make most of the meals, and I clean up around their house every once in a while. So that's kind of what I'm doing
Uh-huh.
in lieu of actual rent.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm just kind of sitting here, not paying any physical money, but paying my time to help out. So
Got it. Nice. And I'm guessing since you wanted a lighter weight tiny house, do you plan to do any moving around in it?
yeah, I would love to. I don't know what that's gonna look like because when I got here, I realized my mom actually needed more of my help than she'd kind of let on. But
Mm,
but that's okay.
okay.
And I'm here. Everything's pretty solid. The house works really well, like as designed, and I'm
Yep.
pretty happy here. And if I don't want to be over at the bigger house, they've got like 4,000 square feet. It's a big house. Yeah, I just come
Wow.
home. It's a little much, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And how remind me how you're heating and cooling?
Okay, so that was one of my things that failed. Living in a higher elevation, if you've got propane, it doesn't work so well. And so one of the things I had to do after
Mm.
we got here was I installed it's like a dual propane pressure kind of a thing on both of my tanks.
Oh.
So like my stove works a little better, my water heater works a little better, but I couldn't get my propane heater to work yet. So I'm not really sure what I need to do with that, or if I don't know, maybe I just got a defective one and I never needed to turn it
Mm-hmm.
on because it was 100 degrees when we got here. But
Yeah.
but I have in-floor heating, radiant heating that I put in.
Okay. Electric or hydronic?
It's electric and it works really nicely,
Okay.
really well. So yeah, I'm
Awesome.
very happy with it. And the cats and the dog love it. So
Yeah. I'll bet. And that's under your floors?
and that's under my floors. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. That's like over the years, my like number one regret has shifted, but like for them, I would say that it's settled on I regret not putting an electric radiant under my hardwood floors the most because it's really not that expensive to put in.
No.
And the floors of the tiny house are freaking cold in the winter.
Yeah. Yes. Now, the thing is that if I moved back to Minnesota, I would want my propane heater working
Yeah.
because the electric heat
Yeah.
wouldn't keep up with the cold that's
Right.
there. But for
Right.
here, where
Right.
like the coldest days are like maybe, I think it got down to like 22, which is nothing.
Yeah.
It more than keeps up with
Yeah.
it. I just turn it a little higher.
That's cool. Nice. Um, and then in terms of cooling, do you have a mini split or a window AC or how are you? Because 100 degrees is pretty hot.
100 degrees is pretty hot. We didn't have cooling when we moved here. It was, and in
Yeah.
fact, I just in the last month, I invested in getting a window AC. Took a little bit because my windows are
Yeah.
smaller. Because that's my big regret is I didn't put in bigger windows.
Mm.
If I'd put in bigger
Ah,
windows,
okay.
everything would be easier. Like we had an egress window situation. I had to special order it, and it took like 9 months or something to get the
Yikes.
right window. So yeah,
Wow.
that was not ideal. And I've had to replace, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've had to replace 5 windows since we brought the house
Already?
home in the last year.
Why?
Well, one was we needed the egress window, which I understood, but my builder was not, again, his mistake. He was like, "Oh, you don't need that.
Yep.
You've got that glass window." No, it's like you need 2 egress windows in a house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Period. That's a thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the big thing about people in lofts when they're buying houses that are like older and used. A lot of those windows are not egress friendly, and so
Yeah.
like the safety is like questionable. So you
Yep.
have to have a very specific sized window to be able to escape,
Mm-hmm.
and your door.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. Most of us will use our door to escape, but yeah, if you're up in a loft and your fire starts in your kitchen, you need to be able to get out. It's a
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, so
Yeah.
part of that was I needed an egress window. I had 4 broken windows. 2 of them broke during the cold part where I wasn't able to work in my house.
Okay.
And I was really bummed out because one of them was my egress window. We had put it in, and then like a month
Oh.
later it was broken. It just
Oh.
popped. Like there must have been some kind of defect or something in the window that we got.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing happened in the bathroom. I came in, I was like, oh no. And then as on the way here, one of our upper windows broke, maybe just from moving, or it's the house settled
Yeah.
wrong, or something twisted, and it just cracked. But that, not a
You
big
must have
deal, but
gotten you must be good at replacing windows.
I'm really good at it now. My plumber taught me.
That's
It
a
was,
skill. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I would like to not ever do it again, but I can if I need to.
Right. Right. Um, is there somewhere that people can see like a video tour of your house? We have a few pictures that we're going to post on the show notes page. But if there is, I'd love to embed, a video in the description for the episode.
I haven't done that yet, but I can, and I'll give you the link to it.
Cool. I guess my like last question, or second to last question, is more of an open-ended one, which is how did your expectations of tiny house living match up to the reality of tiny house living? Like, what is it, what you expected, or are there things that you thought would be different?
It is pretty much what I expected. But again, that was a lot of my thoughtful design about how I want to live in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So I can live exactly as I plan because I designed it to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like even the heated floors, I was like, it would be very cool for like the dog to like sit and look out the window and like lay on the heated floors.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they do. So,
Yeah.
it's just that, yeah, it a lot of it went down to how I planned the space. And so probably the only thing that didn't quite pan out, I had hoped to use a normal sized toilet and just do like composting that way, but it just simply wasn't big enough. So I had to build like a box, and I put a bucket in it, and that's what I'm using for composting.
Yeah.
So I think that was probably the only thing I really had to change.
Yeah.
I always planned to have a gray water egress. So I wasn't ever going to like flush a toilet in here.
Uh-huh.
So, and even like with my sink, like doing my dishes with black water, I had always planned to carry that water out and like dump it outside. So like none of that change, it's working pretty much how I thought as far as that goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. You mentioned that you're putting in solar. Will that be your only source of electricity once that's in, and will it be able to like run your radiant floors and everything?
That's what I'm told. I was kind of like, I was kind of surprised. I'm like, really? You're sure about this? It's going to work? But this is a guy who he basically travels around the country, putting solar in on RVs and planning out people's designs and stuff. And so he was like, "Oh, you've already got like the panels and this that." And he's like, "Well, here's what you need to get." And yeah, he's pretty sure that everything's going to work. Or I've got a really big lithium battery, so that when I get it all done, it I'll be able to like run stuff all night, and it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
Or I'm told. So I'm really hoping that's the way it works, but I don't know enough about solar to like question it too much. So we'll see how that goes.
Nice.
But yeah, he sounded pretty positive about it.
Well, in Arizona, there should be plenty of sun for you to charge the batteries. I would guess that the needs of the system for Minnesota would be a bit different than the needs for Arizona.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that system would hold up in any kind of climate that's going to be cloudy for days and days on end, like it is,
Yeah.
basically anywhere up north. But that's okay, because I do have the ability to plug into an electrical system if I need to. Like, I have an RV plug.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, if it didn't work the way I was hoping, I can just switch over to that.
Got it. And would you mind sharing, what your total all-in cost is for the build? Not counting your labor, obviously.
Yeah, not counting that would be a lot more. I think.
Yeah, you can't. Can't count your own labor.
No, dang it.
Too
my
depressing.
time is worth something. No, I think with the current costs of, like, adding in the solar, it's probably going to be
mm-hmm.
like probably close to 120,000. But again, I got
mm-hmm.
hit with the inflation and
and
those kind of things, and having to replace your windows multiple times does kind of add up pretty quick. So, that's part of,
windows are not cheap.
That is a big part of the expense that was extra. It just was. So
yeah. And what was the price that you had negotiated where it was going to be the complete tiny house, but you were going to help?
Yeah, it was going to be around 79,000. So it was a big difference. But
yeah, definitely a big difference.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you made it through, and from the pictures I've seen, the house looks really awesome, and I'm just so happy for you that you did it.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad it's over.
Yeah.
Can just enjoy it.
The more time goes by, the less you'll remember how much of a struggle it was, and you'll be like, that wasn't that bad. I could do another one.
I don't know about that.
You'd be surprised.
Okay.
Well, one thing that I like to ask all my guests is, what are 2 or 3 resources that have helped or inspired you along the way that you'd like to share?
Well, your tiny house engaged community was really a really nice resource. I know I wasn't always participating a whole lot, but I was kind of following everybody's progress, and I would, like, frantically search for answers for things and see what other people were doing when I was in the middle of stuff, when I got a little bit stuck. That was one. Is her name Dee Williams, I think?
Yes. That is someone's name who's who's awesome in the tiny house world. Yeah.
Yeah. I read her book.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's that other builder that builds like all these cool
Big Tiny.
Yeah, that was like one of the first tiny books I'd read. And then there was also, is it Deke what is his name? Shoots.
Deke Diedrichson.
Thank you. He was another one that I kind of got inspired about how he used spaces. But then, of course, I also liked the Tiny House Nation too. So I'm like, those are kind of the ones that I kept track of when I was looking at things. Well, and your stuff too. I read everything I could get my hands on, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Kate Bohn, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. It was great to get to properly interview you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much to Kate Bohn for being a guest on the show today. You can find the show notes, including photos of Kate's house and a full transcript of the episode, over at thetinyhouse.net/251. Again, that's thetinyhouse.net/251. One thing that you might not know about me is that I love coffee. And if anything I've written or produced has helped you on your tiny house journey and you're looking for a way to say thanks, buying me a cup of coffee is a great way to do so. Head over to thetinyhouse.net/coffee where you can buy me a cup or chip in however much you'd like. Again, that's thetinyhouse.net/coffee. And obviously, this is not required. You can listen to the show forever and never do anything. Well, I hope you'll share it with your friends at least. But again, thetinyhouse.net/coffee to buy me a cup of Joe. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, and I will be back next week with another episode of the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast.